Good morning. Hi, everyone. Hope you all have had a great morning so far. Lovely to see a lot of familiar faces in the audience. I would love to get a sense of who is in the room with us today. So if you can indulge me, could you raise your hand if you are currently working at your first job in the game industry? A couple of folks. Awesome, awesome. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Raise your hand if you have been in the industry for over 3 years. Yeah, oh, a lot of us. Over 5 years, keep your hand up. Over 10 years, keep your hand up. Wow, a lot of veterans. That's awesome to see. I love it. Raise your hand if you ever have or currently manage people. A lot of managers. Wonderful. I love it. Raise your hand if you've ever asked for a raise or a promotion. Good. Raise your hand if you've ever spoken up on behalf of somebody else at your company. I love it. A lot of really great advocates here. That makes me feel really good. Raise your hand if you've ever been given negative feedback. I love it. I love the commonalities here. That makes me feel so good. Raise your hand if you've ever gotten laid off. Yes. How about if you've ever gotten fired before? It's totally okay. It's very early on Thursday morning, asking for a lot of vulnerability here. Great. Thank you so much for indulging me. It helps me get a sense of who is in the room and how to kind of talk to you all. My name is Robin. I am a product manager at CodeCombat, where we make a game that teaches computer science. We are played by over 500,000 players in the United States alone, and we are in 15,000 schools nationwide. I've been in the game industry for 11 years. I started my career as a news editor at a video game website where I learned about game production and development from the press side. Eventually, I moved into game production design where I learned, where I shipped dozens of web and mobile games. It was very exciting. I took a brief hiatus from the game industry to consult about engagement and retention design for a lot of early stage startups where I was able to help apply the learnings of design and engagement and prototyping lessons to help founders build their first core loops, which is really, really exciting for them. And eventually, I came back to games as a user experience designer for CodeCombat. I advocated for myself for a promotion to product manager, and now I define the roadmap and strategy for one of the most widely adopted coding games in middle schools and high schools across the US. I started my dream job when I was 24. I'd been looking for an opportunity to grow as a producer. I wanted to go somewhere where I could learn production skills from more seasoned veterans and be surrounded by energized and creative designers as I figured out the next steps in my career. So just my luck, a position opened up at a studio that I dreamed of working for. I'd played their games growing up. I love the new directions they were taking with their mechanics. It was a place that I'd heard amazing things about from folks that had worked there. And I wanted to learn from the best, so I knew if I got this job, it would change everything for me. So I interviewed, and I got the job. I couldn't believe it. I moved across the country. I found my first apartment. I was going to have a hand in working on franchises that I'd played since I was a kid, and I was so, so excited about it. I was going to be able to learn from designers that I'd admired for ages. I was going to build my career at the studio, and I thought this was going to be it for me. And it was. 2 months later, I was fired. All right, so now who wants to share that they got fired from their job? Yeah? I was in shock, right? I couldn't believe it. I felt like I had ruined everything. In those first days, I thought, oh my God, I just signed a lease. I don't know anyone in this city. I have to find a job now before I run out of money. But who is going to hire me? Who's going to hire somebody who had just gotten herself fired from her dream job? I cried a lot. I was angry. I was devastated. And I replayed those 2 months in my head over and over again, trying to find that one moment I could have done something differently to change that outcome. I felt shame over this for years, right? Those first few days and weeks afterwards, what calcified was this. I lost myself, the biggest opportunity of my life. Don't let it happen again. And I started building up armor, right? Armor that limited me. But I thought that would protect me from ever having this happen again, from ever losing a dream job again. Part of this was youth, right? I lacked the experience and the perspective to understand that careers are long and we have opportunities to recover and bounce back. Part of this was a lack of confidence. I didn't know yet I didn't have a good sense yet of what I was good at, how I could create value for the teams that I was on. And part of this was just not seeing the agency that I had to build something for myself that didn't rely on others' approval or validation of me, from being able to see outside of the box that I'd labeled dream job. Let's talk about dream jobs. I think our industry traffics in dream jobs. How many times have you heard from someone that you know, you are so lucky to be making video games? Wow, that is so cool. How much have you internalized this belief for yourself, right? I'm working 60, 70 hours a week. I'm stressed out. Everything's terrible. Hair's falling out. I'm not eating well. But I'm working in video games. People would kill for this job, right? And how many times do we see junior developers underpaid and overworked on this supposed dream job? Here, work for $20 an hour as a senior designer. It'll be one of the biggest franchises, so it'll be worth it, I guess. I think we use this as a bludgeon against all manner of complaints over labor, compensation, career development issues, and I think it's why we have such a huge problem with retention in our senior leadership. Here's the message that we end up receiving when we hear this. You're replaceable. You do not have control. Sure, you can have your dream job of working in the game industry, but only conditionally. I think the industry is poor for these dynamics. These stories about dream jobs and the control we must give up to have them, I think they stunt us, and I think they burn us out. I think we carry stories with us about dream jobs that shape our worldview. The stories that we experience, the ones that we hear about in our industry, they lead us to shape beliefs that stop us from advocating for ourselves. So what are these stories? The stories when recruiters tell us not to negotiate because there's a line of people willing to take this job. The times when we're asked to work longer hours because that's just the way things are and everyone else is doing it. The times when we ask for a promotion when we know we've been doing this work for years, only to be told again and again, it's not time yet. The goalpost keeps moving. The times when we're just told, do your job, you'll get yours in time. The times when we are fired for doing and saying what we know is right. What beliefs take hold when those are the stories we keep hearing from people around us, when those are the experiences that we keep going through ourselves? So here are some of the self-limiting beliefs that I think we end up with. It's not my job. I think there's a few variations on this one. This belief that it's not our job to do something. It's not my job to take initiative on this project. It's not my job to figure this problem out. It's not my job to surface my concerns. Or it's not my job to need to know what I need to succeed. I'm just going to rely on my manager to tell me. I think we end up here for a few reasons. I think we are afraid of overstepping, either making the wrong call or something, or wandering into territory that someone else is supposed to have ownership over. I think we're also just sometimes totally swamped with work, right? Like if every hour of my day is supposed to be in project management, how am I supposed to make extra time to learn about what I can do to advance my project management career? Maybe you're always in firefighting mode. There's always something critical to deal with, so you never step back and find out what actually is my job. And so we end up looking at situations where we could jump in and solve them, but instead we sit back and say to ourselves, it's not my job. As I prepped this talk, I asked around my network for stories of times when people face situations like this. And one story came to me via a producer who's been in games now for over a decade. At the time, she was new to the industry and still working as an hourly employee. But she was doing important work. She was helping build account management tools. She said to me, I never really thought about the worth of the work that I was doing until I was pulled into a meeting with the VP. The VP sat her down, and he told her, congratulations, you're actually going to be a salaried employee now. You're not going to be hourly anymore. And here was her new salary. So she was flustered. She had no idea that this might be happening. And when she walked away from that meeting, she felt like she'd been blindsided. How much salary should she have been making? Was it actually more than her total take home after the hourly? Was there anything about her day-to-day job that was going to change as a result of this change? I think these are all the things that she thought of after the fact. And as a result, she wasn't in control of the conversation. The conversation controlled her. And we don't see that it's too late, that we should have done our due diligence, that it was our job all along. I think about this as it applies to managers too. Like, are you certain that your direct reports know what their jobs entail? Like, do they know what it takes to get a promotion or a raise? If they don't think that it's their job to know, are you clearly communicating that to them? And if they don't, how will they get there? More self-limiting beliefs. I'm asking for too much. Ugh, I hate that feeling. At my first job, I was making $14 an hour. It was a part-time internship. I was learning a lot, and it was actually a really good time. I stayed at the internship through my sophomore and junior years at college. But 2 years later, I was being paid the same rate. I'd never learned to ask for a raise. I thought, it's not my job to. One day, I was talking to a new intern who had just been hired, who I was helping onboard and train, actually. And he revealed to me that he was making $19 an hour. That's a full 35% more than I was making, and I was training him. Right? So that was devastating to my self-worth because I thought I was doing really well. I ended up taking this opportunity to gather feedback and results for myself. I listed the initiatives that I'd taken on. I listed the projects that was coming on board, that I was getting off the ground, and the value that I was creating for the organization. And I brought this information to my manager. This was the first time I asked for a raise, and I was nervous. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how it was going to turn out. But she listened, and she agreed that I deserved a raise, and she told me that she would go get approval for one. The next day, she came back to me. She said, "Robin, great news. Based on your performance, we can give you a raise. You'll be making $19 an hour." At first, I was excited, right? Oh my God, a raise. I successfully advocated for myself. It took a few hours to sink in, right? Well, at least I was being paid the same amount as the new intern, but I had over a year's worth of additional experience. So I went back and I asked my manager, hey, this seems kind of unfair. Can you help me understand how the pay grades work here? The clarification that I got back was that the pay rates were actually set according to the year of college you were at. So freshmen earned a certain rate, sophomores earned a different rate, juniors earned a different rate. That still didn't quite sit well with me though, right? Because if that was true, then why wasn't I getting a raise as soon as I became a junior? So I asked my manager this, and she expressed disappointment. She thought I should have been grateful for getting such a big raise at all, and I ended up feeling like I shouldn't have bothered. Like, even though I knew it was unfair, the belief I took away was just don't keep pushing, right? Like, don't ask for too much or people will think you're ungrateful. Take what you can get. More self-limiting beliefs. My work should speak for itself. I think there's something about this belief that feels fair, right? Like that we should be recognized on the merits of our work. I designed this level. My team should clearly be able to see why it's going to fit well within the story progression. I wrote the feature spec for a new mechanic. It should be clear why it aligns well with the goals for our quarter. I think this belief also provides cover for something that we fear, right? Fear of being seen as too proud of our work. Even if we were just talking about how excited we were to solve a problem, how we did a great job communicating our idea, I think we are fearful of this. And I think this belief, it also comes as a result of the handful of bad actors where they cross the line from being proud about what they're accomplished to being bragging or being condescending or being a know-it-all. There's an isolated few people who take credit for others' work or inflate their contributions, and it's really just a handful, but I think we hear about them enough that we have a lasting effect that we are afraid to talk about our work because we're afraid of being perceived as that person, even when we're not, even when we are genuinely doing great work and deserve to speak about it. So it's limiting because we end up not knowing how to present our work. We end up not knowing how to demonstrate our expertise and mastery of a subject, not being able to advocate for our career progression because we don't know how to talk about it without feeling like we're being perceived as arrogant. It's always been done this way. How many of you have gotten resistance in the form or pushback that sounded like this when you tried to suggest a new idea, right? It's always been done this way. Over time, it wears you out, right? And it becomes another belief that boxes us in that makes us feel like things will never change because it's always been done this way. This environment artist that I know told me that it took her 2.5 years to advocate for her senior title promotion because it's always been done this way, right? She had taken over responsibilities from another senior artist years ago when he had left the company, but she was told, well, we always wait for certain review cycles. We promote people when it feels right. She had no concrete feedback on what to do to get the promotion other than wait until it feels right. How are people supposed to know how to improve when that's the sort of feedback you give them? Another friend tells me about a leadership meeting that she was attending with other animation leads at her studio, where they wanted to fire one of the employees who had been underperforming. And she said they had a history of not giving people warnings about their performance, and the employees ended up always feeling blindsided by the termination. I know that feeling very, very well. And when they sat in the meeting talking about this, everyone kept saying, yes, I know we've always done it this way. Someone should step up, though. Yeah, someone should try to fix these problems and advocate for the employees. And no one except her said anything because it's always been done this way, and inertia is really hard to change. More self-limiting beliefs about our dream jobs. I'll be punished for this. So fear of retribution, fear of what will happen if I say something. It's such a huge one. I know everyone in this room has thought about situations where they didn't want to say something because they were worried that if they advocated for themselves, they'll be punished for it. This story comes from a senior game designer with 7 years in the industry. Years ago, he was hired at what he would probably consider his dream job, working on a AAA game, on a franchise that he'd grown up playing, doing level design that was totally in his wheelhouse, working at his dream job. Working overtime at his dream job, actually. He tells me about this Friday meeting that they had where all the designers are pulled into a room, asked to go around a circle one by one and answer the question, are you coming in this weekend? So think about the moral cost of answering this question, right? You think about hearing every single one of your coworkers begrudgingly commit to working overtime another weekend and what it takes to say no in that situation. It pits everyone against each other, right? It's like a firing line. These were already people who were working really hard. These are people who didn't feel like they could say no because they feared retribution, not only from their lead, but from other coworkers that were being called out that they were being called out in front of. He said no. He didn't get fired, but he ended up with tasks to fix bugs instead of designing content. He ended up burning out. I think shame holds us back. When I hear these stories, when I remember what I went through, I start to internalize these beliefs and I take them as truths, right? I think about the shame that I felt for years after getting fired. And I think about how desperately I want to avoid going through that experience ever again. So I took all these beliefs and they became my armor. They tried to protect me from that shame because I didn't want to lose this dream job ever again. But here's the truth about that dream job. 2 weeks into the job, my manager calls me in for a one-on-one. He says, Robin, some people have been telling me that they think you are pretentious. I just want you to know that. I didn't have the wherewithal to ask for more details, right? I was young. I didn't know who said this, if there were any actual examples. I didn't know how to improve. I didn't advocate for myself against this feedback. I had no evidence, no advice, no next steps, but I thought, well, this is my dream job after all. I should take this advice and change. Maybe I should stop speaking up the way that I do in meetings. Maybe I should not be so eager to share my ideas. Maybe I should be quieter, smaller. So 2 weeks into this dream job, I was told my new coworkers were talking about me behind my back and I had no idea who it was. I spent the next 1.5 months paranoid, terrified, feeling like everyone's eyes were on me, feeling judgment, feeling like I couldn't be quiet enough. Who could I trust? And then at the 2-month mark, I was fired, right? And I heard gossip afterwards that I was being called uppity, ungrateful, too opinionated, that those were the reasons I was fired. So those were the beliefs that became my truths, right? Be careful of showing up as yourself. You'll get yourself fired from your dream job. Don't be so showy. Don't be so loud. Don't try to ask for more. Don't overstep. Keep your head down. Follow your manager's lead. Don't stand out. You'll be punished. Don't try to change the way things work. Know your place. I was taught that I had to change for this dream job, to behave like they expected me to, that I was the one that was supposed to change for my supposed dream job. So all these stories that we hear, I think they build up over time. They create an illusion that we don't have control, that we shouldn't advocate for ourselves, and that to try to do so will cost us goodwill, it'll cost us career advancement, and possibly our jobs. There's a tarot card called the Eight of Swords, and it's a card about blind fear, about only seeing a perspective where you are trapped, where you feel like you can't get out. The reality of this card is that the swords are only an illusion, and if you just open your eyes and lift up your gaze, you'll find your way out. If you can focus on the reality of what's in front of you and have the courage to acknowledge your fear, acknowledge that those stories you've heard before, the stories that you've lived before, they're no longer serving you. They're no longer protecting you, but instead they're trapping you. You can learn to move through it. To recognize this experience, it may have shaped you and who you are. You can move through it to move on, and you have to move on. It's taken a long time to undo those beliefs, and that's why I want to shine light on this shame and talk about self-advocacy. I want to share these stories and talk about these self-limiting beliefs because for so long I thought I was the only one. I thought that the shame would protect me, but instead just made me smaller. Over time, I learned how to advocate for myself, and I came to understand what I could control and what I could not. So at long last, self-advocacy. Let's talk about how self-advocacy allows us to rewrite these stories, let go of these self-limiting beliefs, and take control. Self-advocacy is realizing we have control and that it is our right to take control, that no dream job exists in a vacuum without us shaping it. Self-advocacy is realizing that actively participating in creating an environment that reflects our values and not just passively experiencing the environment around us is something we can actually achieve. It's a journey of shaping a world where your dream job is showing up every day in your truth, letting go of the outcome. It's trusting that you will be enough to handle whatever comes your way. And it's creating the world that won't fire you by moving fast through all the spaces that will fire you as quickly as you can. So what are the ways we can replace self-limiting beliefs with new habits that will get you what you actually want? Ask for feedback. Learn to ask for feedback early and often. Early because you want to get feedback as soon as you can towards a learning experience. Often so you constantly have opportunities to learn and iterate. How many of you dread feedback though? Like when your manager is like, hey, I've got some feedback for you, you brace yourself, right? You're like, oh, I don't know what's gonna happen. What did I do wrong? There's that cognitive bias that for every negative comment that we hear, we need 10 positive ones to balance it out. It kind of sucks, but it's true. I know that when I receive feedback that is critical, even if it's constructive and valid, it tends to overshadow everything else I've heard that day that is genuinely positive. So if nothing else, asking for feedback more often gives you a pool of feedback to take from so that when those difficult ones come your way, it doesn't really send you reeling. I also think feedback is important because I don't know how we improve without it. Specifically, you want feedback from your manager regularly so you know how they expect you to grow in your role. Raise your hand if you know what your manager considers success criteria for your job. Like, do you know what it takes to get a promotion or a raise? So few hands, right? Like, that's crazy. That's crazy to me. Raise your hand. Yeah, raise your hand if you know how your job performance is evaluated. Okay, a few more hands, right? But like we don't know. So asking for feedback helps clarify that. You also want to have one-on-ones with your manager regularly and know the difference between a status meeting and a one-on-one, where a one-on-one should focus on you, your growth, feedback for you, feedback you have for your manager. It's not about reporting on the status of projects that you're working on. Also ask for feedback from your coworkers, right? I think a lot of larger companies, they conduct 360 reviews as some sort of annual or quarterly process. Don't wait for those, right? If your company does those, don't wait for those. If your company doesn't do those, definitely don't wait for those. Do these on your own when you find opportunities, right? Here's something I do regularly. So as part of my job as a product manager, I run meetings. And one of my important responsibilities is to facilitate discussion, create consensus, and provide a clear direction forward for what we'll be doing on our roadmap. So at every opportunity where I'm having conversations about our roadmap and what we're doing, I try to ask people in the room for feedback. Like, is it clear why we're building this feature? Like when I just did this presentation, was it clear why we decided to pursue this feature? Sometimes somebody had a different opinion, right? And so I follow up with them and be like, hey, I know you're really excited about this one idea and we didn't pursue it. Do you feel like you were heard? Do you feel like I kind of like allowed you space to discuss your idea? So let me give you another example if you're still kind of feeling resistant to getting feedback. Right now I have one direct report. She's an intern, she's bright, she's enthusiastic, she's awesome, she's wonderful. Sometimes she leads a discussion and I'll think to myself, ooh, she handled that criticism really well. I should tell her about that so that she can grow. Or, oh, that one was a little rough. She kind of got distracted and went off on a tangent. I should let her know another way to pick back up the conversation and get it back on track if that happens again. But what happens as a product manager after every meeting is that somebody else wants clarification or the server's on fire and I gotta go help fix it. So despite my best intentions, I may totally forget to follow up or write down something that I intended to say to her. So I've actually started telling her, hey, like you should bug me for feedback. Like ask me for feedback regularly because I'm gonna forget. And if we lose those opportunities, we both lose, right? I lose an opportunity to help her and she loses an opportunity to grow. So ask for feedback from your coworkers and your manager. Ask about some small interactions, ask about bigger projects. Early and often, just do it. Learn to present. Here's another habit to adopt to better be able to advocate for yourself. Learn to present. Specifically, learn to present your work, learn to communicate your expertise and approach, and understand that communication is not just reciting information, it's really making sure the other party has received it. I want to revisit that belief from earlier about my work should speak for itself. I think if you're relying on your work to speak for itself, you're only doing half your job. I think there's almost always an opportunity to talk about your work in a way that doesn't come off as boastful, and I think it extends all the way from small opportunities like a stand-up, all the way through a meeting where you actually are trying to create buy-in for your idea and create alignment. So learning to present confidently is its own separate talk and workshop. Definitely, if you are interested in learning more about this, which you should, Google 13 ways designers screw up client presentations. I'll write that down later. Mike Montiero has some amazing tips. But here are the high-level takeaways that I kind of refer to. Know your audience when you're presenting. Know who you're talking to. Understand what their motivations are, what they are hoping to hear from you. Know your goal. Nearly always your goal is to create buy-in for your idea, even if there's no formal process. Sometimes you do need a specific outcome like stakeholder approval, but even in low-key meetings, right? Like you actually want to generate excitement for your idea and buy-in so the next time it comes up, you have advocates for that idea already existing. Do not, when you're presenting, give a real estate tour. If you're presenting a level, don't be like, here's where the player spawns. And here's a bunch of explosive barrels that I spawn near them. And over there are the robots wielding flamethrowers. Don't tell them what they can see, right? Like tell them what your intended outcome was. I want the player to feel super panicked about the impending imminent threat of robots with flamethrowers. Sell your audience on why your work delivers on the outcome. Don't give them a real estate tour. And ask for the right feedback. Do not ask, do you like it? Do not ask, what do you think? Ask, does this level design meet our shared goal of creating a sense of urgency and dramatic tension? My friend is a systems designer with a background in computer science, and she shared with me a story about how she was first hired as a narrative designer at this one studio, but she was really worried that her programming skills were going to get rusty. So she was writing spec and doing visual scripting for this game, and one day, during the course of poking around in the game engine, realized that there was a layer of Lua that was actually directly connected to the work that she was doing, and that she could potentially improve. So she took time to learn about the systems, talk to other designers who are more senior at the studio, and then presented her manager with what she had hoped to accomplish by taking more of initiative in that project. She made the case that it was already attached to the work that she was doing, and that she was proficient in the programming languages that it would require. And I'm sure her manager was just delighted to hear this. And as a result, she was able to own the rest of that feature and optimize on its execution, right? She told me, sometimes your manager doesn't know your whole skill set, so how could they advocate for you without you telling them? So learn to present, learn to tell your story. Know your value. If the only time you get a raise is when your manager says, surprise, you're getting a raise, you've been underpaid for months already. That's just the truth. If the only time you get a promotion is when your manager is like, surprise, you're a senior product manager now, I've already been doing the job for months. Of the things that are definitely your responsibility, it's to know your value. You should know the market value for your role. You should understand the concrete value that you're delivering to your team by showing up at your job every day. I think we let this dream jobism thing stop us from asking for this too, because I think we think to ourselves like, I'm working on this game I love, I'm creatively fulfilled, I don't care if the pay is as good. But even if you are enjoying your job and learning, your studio is not your friend. You deserve to be compensated for the value that you're creating for your company, so don't settle for a compromise. I think knowing your value also inoculates you against this pushback of you're asking for too much, right? If you are asking for a salary that you know is well within the industry pay grades for the experience that you're bringing, then it's not too much, right? Your studio might not give it to you, but that's on them. That's about the outcome, but you are not asking for too much just by asking for it. I mentioned earlier about the producer who's promoted to a salaried position but didn't know her value and couldn't negotiate on it. She shared a follow-up story with me about later in her career when knowing her value really helped her through a tough situation. During the interview process for a job, she told her soon-to-be manager that the one thing that would guarantee that she would leave the team would be crunching. And I know that's a hard line to draw, especially if you're new to the industry, but it was something that she made incredibly clear to her would-be manager. I won't crunch, I will quit. So at first it was a week here, right? And then it was a week there. The week turned into a month, another month turned into 2. And every time she brought it up, she said, hey, I said I wouldn't do this. And they ended up crunching for a full year. It took her getting a sinus infection and taking 2 weeks off of work to get her perspective back. That this was a line that she'd already drawn. And so she started looking for another job, right? Because she knew her value. She understood that the work that she was doing, the experience that she had, would allow her to get a job where she didn't have to compromise on this, especially because she'd drawn a line already. Knowing her value made it possible for her to understand there were other opportunities out there. All right, let's break the cycle. When you hear resistance in the form of it's always been done this way, what it really means is the status quo benefits people above you, right? You are, each one of you, a capable individual who is a member of the game development industry. By virtue of being here, you are leaders. It's always been done this way is an incredibly dangerous phrase, and we have to keep looking for opportunities to break that cycle as participants in this environment, right? We are the ones who can break these cycles. The animation director I spoke about earlier, who sat in the meeting, listened to people refuse responsibility for improving employee performance and start firing them, she got fed up. She said, well, someone should keep doing something, someone should do something. She said, me, I'll do it. She proposed a better solution to get the ball rolling, even though being the first to speak up, the first to dissent, is terrifying. And the senior artist who fought for 2.5 years to get her senior promotion, she doesn't want that to happen to other people, right? She's taking initiative to make sure that others don't go through that same thing, getting the runaround for years by proposing a better system so that everyone has goals and expectations for promotions. So she's breaking the cycle even though she was caught in it for years herself. Speak your truth. When I was hired at CodeCombat, I was employee number 8. I was the first person of color. I was the first woman who was hired for an on-site role. I'd been consulting for various companies for years, and it had been a while since I'd had a full-time job, but I was really looking forward to it. I wanted to grow with a team again. I wanted to feel invested with a product and build something phenomenal from the ground up. The opportunity with CodeCombat was exciting, and it was totally aligned with what I wanted to do. I could bring product design and strategy to a team that was building a game to increase access to computer science education, right? This is something I've always aspired to do. So I was contributing a ton of value, building new design practices from scratch, and helping pivot the product towards the educational marketplace. And things were going great. 2 months into the job, we were hiring for new team members. We had started to interview to fill some open roles. And I made an observation. All the interview candidates I saw coming in were white men. So I could have said nothing. I definitely considered saying nothing, right? I didn't want to have to say anything. I was settling into a routine again, and it felt really comfortable and fulfilling except for this one thing. How do I want to show up? This was an opportunity for me to advocate for myself for something really important to me. If this was the place that I was going to be able to grow again, chart a career path for myself and commit to a team, to feel like I could bring my whole self to work, then I had to say something, right? Even if it meant that I would get labeled a squeaky wheel, an angry feminist, a troublemaker. I mean, I was terrified. When I later told this story to a mentor of mine, she told me she wished I had told her before, because she said she would have told me not to. She told me she had seen this exact conversation go wrong so many times, and she didn't want to see me face consequences that she believed were going to come my way. I found an opportunity during a regularly scheduled one-on-one with my manager. Of course, I was super nervous going in. I didn't know how much social capital I'd have to use on this, but I opened with, hey, I have something to talk about today. I want to talk about diversity at our company. I told him that as somebody who was really invested in this company and its culture, that diversity among my coworkers was really important to me, and that I thought it was really critical to developing a game that was supposed to increase access for programming to everyone. And then I waited for the longest 3 seconds of my life. Thankfully, he responded positively and acknowledged that they really hadn't done anything in the hiring process to make it more inclusive, and thanked me for bringing it up. So I was relieved. It was a win. It was a great opportunity for me to test the waters and get the validation that this was the job that I wanted to be at. But then he said, "It's clear that you've expressed a lot of interest in this, and you seem to have a lot of knowledge about this area. You should feel free to take charge and lead the initiative for diversity change." All right, so how many winced a little bit just now? All right, so in those few moments, I had another decision I had to make, right? Like saying yes and agreeing to take on this work as the only woman, as the only person of color. I knew how this was going to turn out, right? Either I have to do a second job on top of my existing job, or it would never get done. But I'd already gotten a yes. Was I going to be seen as ungrateful or asking for too much if I push back again? So I told him, I think the team needs to work on this problem together if we really believe it's a priority. And I challenged the idea that I'm the one to lead it. I explained why the optics of having the only woman, person of color, lead this initiative would feel really self-serving. And that he should be the one to lead it as a CTO co-founder of this company, right? Leading it from the top down. So cue another 3 longest seconds of my life. Luckily, he immediately understood, and he thanked me for bringing this up while the team was still young, and pledged to take next steps to think about what we could do to improve our hiring and culture processes. There were a lot of moments that day when I thought to myself, man, I really shouldn't risk this, especially not at this auspicious 2-month mark. Right, maybe it'll backfire again. Maybe I'm gonna come across as too emotional. It was, what if it jeopardized the work that I really did love doing by bringing this up? But I realized that the work that I want to do is dependent on me being happy and secure and invested in my role. I needed to show up, and I needed to advocate for myself and the things that I wanted for my job. I found a job that gave me the space to speak my truth. And I would have done it again no matter the outcome. But in case you guys want to know the outcome, 2.5 years later, our team is 50% women and 1/3 people of color. I think this is the question we need to ask ourselves. I think we need to know firmly what our individual values are. And it's from here that we can start letting go of the beliefs that hold us back. And then we need to pledge to stand up for those values. What are your values? What is the line for you? What are you willing to do for your dream job? Take a second with me, just close your eyes for a second and imagine what that dream job actually feels like, right? Not the game you're working on, not the company you get to tell people you work at. What is a day in the life of feeling fulfilled, challenged, inspired, collaborative, proud, and joyful at your dream job? What does that actually look like? And how will you show up at your job next week different now that you have that vision in your mind? There's a lot you can't control. So there's some things you can't control. You can't control layoffs, right? You ultimately can't control retribution or what people think about you. And largely you can't really control being fired. I want to challenge the idea, though, that your purpose and goal when you show up at work every day is just to not get fired, or just to ship a AAA game, or just to put in your time and eventually you'll get what you deserve. Instead, I want you to let go of your fear of what will happen, and instead just be resilient and advocate for yourself. For those of us who are really seeking to understand how we can become better leaders in this industry, how to improve working conditions for ourselves and those around us, I think this is a really important mindset shift, and I think it's what we need to do. We can control how we self-advocate, right? We can control a lot. We can let go of the fears and the outcomes and just show up. Just show up and stand in your truth. Fail fast out of the jobs that are not going to change for you. I'm not on the stage speaking to you to help you not get fired. I'm not even really here to help you negotiate for a raise or promotion. I'm here to help you realize that getting fired is not not only not in your control, but it may be the best thing to happen to you. My hope is that something here resonated with you today that will encourage you to think about the ways that you can break out of your box that you may already find yourself in and advocate for yourself. So before I wrap up with some closing thoughts, I wanted to open up to a few questions. I want to know what's on your mind. I want to know what's coming up for you. I want to know what are the fears that are holding you back.